Hey everybody, I hope everybody's doing well today. I was just over watching one of the YouTube channels that I look at pretty much every day, and that channel is done by Pinball Prepping, and he brought a subject up this morning that I watched about a mineral called cadmium. Now, I've never heard of cadmium. I'm not a scientist. I only know some of the basic minerals and elements and chemicals. I was in nursing school, so we did learn about some of these things, but and I remember in junior high we had to memorize the element thing that they had, like iron is Fe, all that kind of stuff, salt, da 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 da. But anyways, so I watched him this morning, and I was listening to what he was saying about what the FDA and USDA came out with some kind of warning about cadmium being extra high in certain kinds of foods. And I'm thinking, wow, it was stuff like potatoes, spinach, rice, just your basic stuff that you think that is a staple, especially for prepping. Spinach being a healthy produce that spinach high in iron. It's really supposed to be very good for you. And I'm thinking, wait a minute now, this just sounds like a governmental persuasion type of thing, you know what I mean? So I looked up cadmium, and it says here, what is cadmium? Cadmium is a natural element found in tiny amounts in air, water, soil, and food. All soils and rocks, including coal and mineral fertilizers, contain some cadmium. Most cadmium used in the United States is extracted during the production of other metals such as zinc, lead, and copper. So this particular mineral is naturally found in everything. Some things are going to have a little more cadmium than others. Well, the government was saying that unusually high, it's a lot higher than it should be in potatoes and spinach and rice, etc., okay? And there could be many reasons for that. I don't know. But we've got other minerals just as harmful, if not even worse. Like mercury, is extremely bad. We don't want a bunch of mercury. They have warned us for years about certain fish that have really high mercury content, okay? But if you, if you eat tuna, it has mercury, but it's a lower level. But you're supposed to only eat tuna maybe, 3 times a week or 4 times a week, opposed to every single day, whatever. Now, I think I reminded everybody on a different video about persuasion. We really have to be diligent and careful and selective in what we are learning, especially from organizations that are trying to persuade us to believe what they want us to believe, okay? I remember back in the 80s, I mentioned this before, about margarine. Actually, it was the 70s. And they tried to convince everybody that margarine was the best thing for you, and got to cut butter out of our diets because butter bad, margarine good. And the government, had commercials on it, and everybody was buying margarine, and margarine was cheap, and butter went way up in price. Well, it turns out that margarine is really bad for you, and it's butter that is not bad for you. Now, if you sit there and eat a stick of butter, I mean, how gross, you know. You got to take things in moderation. Use common sense. But, there's a reason why there's certain things on this planet. God created this planet with minerals and elements and animals and plants for our benefit. Not everybody can tolerate milk from a cow, but cows are beneficial for the milk, for the protein, for babies, and then butter is made from milk. We have all kinds of things that we make from the resources that God gave us. Cadmium, I have no idea what it is useful for. I am not a chemist. I am not a scientist. But there are reasons why God put together the planet that he did. So, anyways, let's take a little further look into this cadmium. You can look at the FDA.gov site, environmental contaminants in food. Okay? It says it's in soil, water, air. It's everywhere. There's arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium. They are the heavy metals or toxic elements may occur naturally in environment and are often at higher levels from past industrial uses and pollution. Now, our planet is not as pristine as it was in 1500s. We don't have the natural clean air and water and earth that we had back then. We just don't. We have polluted the planet. No doubt we have. We have. With chemicals in the air, chemicals everywhere. If it's in the air, it's going to be in the water, it's going to be in the soil. With the fertilizers that they have today, with all the chemicals and everything is tainted and contaminated. It is. And we've been growing up like that for a long, long time. I asked about the cadmium in food in 1950s, okay, because that's the era that I was born in, that time frame. Chronic cadmium poisoning from the consumption of food occurred in the 1950s in cadmium polluted areas in Japan. Almost 200 cases, mainly postmenopausal women, have been reported with the Itai disease, exhibiting symptoms of disturbed calcium metabolism, osteoporosis, and osteomalacia. Now, they had a big contamination problem back then, and that's on the site Science Direct. Oops, let me move that a little bit. So I don't know what that's from. Japan, 1950s. Maybe it was due to the nuclear stuff. I don't know. But they've known about cadmium for a long time. Let's see here. Cadmium poisoning. In the 50s and 60s, industrial exposure to cadmium was high. But as the toxic effects of cadmium became apparent, industrial limits on cadmium exposure. Okay, so once they realized that there was cadmium exposure and it was really high, and it was from mainly from industrial exposure, they set up laws, etc., to do something about it. So you have to do your homework. 1950s refrigerator, cadmium on the racks. So you just, look it up, research it, What I'm saying is, now he did mention on there too what he was reading from the FDA and USDA, etc., was that children, the younger the people, children, babies, the more crucial it is to make sure that they don't, have this high levels of cadmium in their system. Our bodies do get rid of the cadmium. They're able to deal with it. Now, I did look up, it goes through the kidneys, I believe also the liver, I think it said. But we eat cadmium daily. We are constantly putting cadmium amongst other minerals and elements and chemicals in our body daily. Now, if you have a homestead and you have a farm and you've got an organic farm and you use natural compost and manure, I would imagine that would be less amount of cadmium, but it's going to be in that too, because cadmium is in everything. Like I said, water, air, soil, it's in everything. Now, cadmium can cause cancer. High amounts of cadmium can cause cancer. Then I looked up the cadmium high levels in rice, potatoes, spinach, and wheat. Dietary exposure to cadmium from 6 common foods: rice, spinach, and oats, barley, potatoes, and wheat. So that are the main foods that have high amounts of cadmium. This article is from 2023, and it says American infants and young children of these age groups who regularly consume these products. So if you have small children, babies, these products should be, I would say, not totally out of their diet, but just limit, some of this stuff, so it's not on a daily basis. Children need wheat. What is in wheat? Wheat is basically your B vitamins, and potatoes as well. You can try to find substitutes that have the content of these vitamins and minerals that children need, and just not give them so much of these products. Their bodies are going to have to learn how to get rid of these products, and people have been doing that for thousands of years, I would imagine, because cadmium is a natural mineral that's in our soil and our water, etc. So it is naturally in there. I would say don't freak out about this cadmium. Just be smart. Things in moderation. But I also do want to mention again, be diligent, be selective in what certain top organizations reveal to you, because we're seeing right now how funny that they would put out an alert, a warning, or information on this from the FDA, etc. Trying to make it sound like, ooh, because what are they going to say next? What's coming next? Crickets are better? Meat has cadmium in it. If you're eating cattle or lamb or whatever kind of meat, it's going to have cadmium in it too, small amounts. cattle eat grass and all kinds of other grasses and stuff, hay, whatever it is that they eat, it's going to be in that, and it's in their body. And if you eat kidneys, liver of the cattle, blah, 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 you're going to get higher amounts of cadmium. So, use common sense, do your homework, don't freak out about cadmium. I think this is another, I'm not trying to say that the government is lying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I think it's just something that it's a concern that I don't know. It's a concern that they're putting out there that maybe we should know about, but maybe it's a certain kind of agenda. Here it is, back in 2012, an article, 1950s and 60s, industrial exposure to cadmium was high. Food processing methods, migration of this, that was Japan. China's tainted rice trail, cadmium. So, how many children have been exposed to heavy metals? This is 2021. So if we go far back enough, we're going to find articles probably from the 1900s, 1990s rather, 1980s. Here's one, 1997, Cold War chemical tests over American cities. A series of secret tests conducted by the U.S. Army in the 1950s. Cadmium in their normal daily contact with soil, water, food. So, I've been eating cadmium since I was a little kid, probably pretty high in some areas. I don't know. I was raised for the first 3.5, 4 years of my life out in Pennsylvania. Well, for the first part, New York and then Pennsylvania, and then came to Minnesota in 1958. Where our food came from, I have no idea. We bought everything at the store. We're not a farming family. I don't know how much cadmium, or for that matter, any other mineral that's toxic, etc. Here I am, going to be 69 years old, and I'm just saying, my mom, she lived to be 87 years old. She was not a smoker. She grew up on a farm. They had a farm out there in Oregon, and she lived to be 87. And as far as I know, she didn't have any toxic stuff in her system that was out of the ordinary. She didn't have any symptoms. Oh, I should probably look that up. Okay, let's look up let's look up symptoms. Cadmium symptoms. Okay. Let's see. Let's choose the National Organization for Rare Disorders. Heavy metal poisoning. Let's look up Verywell Health. Cadmium poisoning causes, effects, and treatment. Okay, and this is from 2022. So let's see. What is cadmium poisoning? Cadmium is a metal used in batteries. Aha, so there is a use for this stuff. Solar cells, okay. alloys, pigments, and more. Cadmium poisoning occurs when someone ingests or inhales contaminated food, water, or air. If you come in contact with toxic levels of cadmium, you may experience respiratory or digestive effects depending on whether you inhaled or ingested the substance. Symptoms of cadmium poisoning differ depending on whether you inhaled or ingested the metal. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain and cramping, tenesmus, a sensation that you need to have a bowel movement but you don't actually need to defecate. Flu-like symptoms, chest pain, coughing, shortness of breath, complications, pulmonary edema, and blood clots. Causes of cadmium poisoning: exposure to cadmium through the air is unlikely to happen unless you work in an industry that specifically uses cadmium. However, cigarette smoking can also expose you to cadmium over the long term. So if you're smoking 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, wow. People who work in cadmium-related industries may inhale cadmium because of dust or fumes in the work area. People in these industries may also contaminate food and water sources by not washing their hands or removing their clothes when going from their work area to their break area or home. A regular person is more likely to be poisoned with cadmium through contaminated food or water. This typically happens due to mining and smelting industries contaminating nearby soil or water, allowing the metal to enter the food chain. Some plants, tobacco, are more likely to take up cadmium from the soil than others. Other foods that may contain elevated levels of cadmium include, oh my goodness, mushrooms, shellfish, organ meats, rice, cereal grains, potatoes, dark chocolate. Oh my gosh, even dark chocolate. However, the amount of toxicity varies depending on the area, since cadmium can travel long distances once airborne. Oh, terrific. It can be challenging to pinpoint the contaminating source. So if you've got a highly industrial country, like let's say China, and their pollution control is subpar, let's say, and all that air is coming over to the United States, well, guess what? Other sources of cadmium include phosphate fertilizers, sewage sludge, batteries, plating, plastics, pigments, burning of fossil fuels. Diagnosis of cadmium poisoning: your medical history, your symptoms, whether you have any risk factors of cadmium toxicity, whether you think you've been exposed to cadmium, how you were exposed to cadmium. Now, if you're a farmer and you're dealing with fertilizer on a daily basis, you're out there, these farmers, they do this all the time. I don't know if what they experience or what the levels of cadmium or if you live near or work at industries. But I think that we have some of the toughest laws in the world for a lot of these pollutants, etc. Treatment: IV fluids to rehydrate you, provides supplemental oxygen. If necessary, you would be put on a ventilator to help you breathe. Encourage vomiting if you ingested it. Perform gastric lavage, the stomach pumping. Making sure there's adequate ventilation in the workspace. Consistently wearing protective equipment. I'm pretty sure OSHA would be on an industry with this kind of stuff. Ensuring the work area is free of dust. Removing clothing and showering after exiting the work area. avoiding eating or drinking in the workspace, frequent and thorough hand washing between working and eating or drinking. Prognosis: people can recover from acute cadmium poisoning by ingestion and experience no long-term side effects. However, in cases where a person ingests enough high amount of cadmium, they may experience gastrointestinal bleeding, necrosis, which is tissue death of the liver and kidneys, heart problems, and metabolic acidosis, upset of the body's acid-base balance. The prognosis is even more serious for the people who inhale the high in concentrations of cadmium, even for just a brief period. In such cases, inhalation may be fatal. Thankfully, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, this rarely occurs. In case of long-term cadmium exposure, people may experience a host of adverse effects such as organ damage and cancer. Other potential chronic effects include kidney disease, lung disease, immune system problems, nervous system problems, fragile bones, low birth weight, increased risk of lung cancer. Cadmium is naturally occurring metal. Cadmium poisoning involves ingesting or breathing in contaminated foods, drinks, or air. You're more likely to experience acute or chronic cadmium poisoning if you work in a specific industries such as mining and smelting. So if you want to look at this is at Verywell Health, and he's got there's other articles to, other stuff on the web that you can look up. So as far as Pinball, I thank him for bringing up this issue, noticing that it was put out by the FDC, the FDA and USDA, to let us know that this is what they are saying about these food. But apparently it's been like this all along. And my conclusion, my opinion, okay, this is my opinion. You have to come up with your own opinion, do your homework, talk to your doctor, blah, 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 blah. My opinion is, I think that just like it says in the article, if you live where there's industry or you're working in that kind of industry, etc., if you're eating a lot of potatoes and blah, 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 these certain foods, perhaps, eating some of those foods might be of concern if you're concerned about getting cancer. But I've been eating bread for a long time, every day, a sandwich, and other stuff. But I really think it's a scare tactic. That's my thought. Whoops, that's my thought. Is and we may hear some more of this stuff with other food. Slowly the food, first it's the spinach and the oats and the potatoes, and yeah, it's true, they're higher in cadmium than other foods, okay, so there is truth, to it. And then it'll be some other kind of element that is in other foods that, like mercury or whatever they'll have. And you'll look it up and be like, oh yeah, it's in that food too. Oh no, I'm not going to be able to eat that either. You see what I'm saying? Little by little, they're getting you used to what they're saying and where they want you to go with this, okay? And then they'll introduce you to their better foods, like lab-grown meat. And remember, I talked about lab-grown meat and Henrietta Lacks, okay? I talk about that in a different video. But they've got an agenda going on. Remember that. They've got this agenda going on, and they're trying to persuade you. Remember the margarine good and butter bad, and it turned out that butter is good and margarine is bad, and eggs were really bad. You shouldn't eat any more than 1 or 2 eggs a week, and then it turns out that's not so. You can eat more eggs than that. So just do your homework, be selective, use common sense, and Pinball, you can go over and watch what he says this morning on cadmium. I thank him very, very much for bringing up this subject. I just felt that I needed to address it because I just had to put my thoughts on that and bring that to you. Anyways, have a good weekend, everybody.